I'm from Mexico City. I was born and raised there. And I started playing drums when I was 5. And the short version of how that happened is my mother, Susana, has a brother, Ignacio. Ignacio has a girlfriend, Ana. Ana has a brother, Fito, and Fito was a drummer. And one day they took me over to Fito's place, and when they opened the door, the first thing I saw was an amazing looking Ludwig see-through kit like the one John Bonham used to play. And I immediately ran inside. I grabbed a stick and I started banging on the drums. And Fito came down really quick. And when he saw me, he was like, okay, let me show you how it's done. And he sat down and started to play like a rock beat or something. And I thought it was the most amazing thing. And that was it for me, hooked for life. So I started coming over to his place, and I would bring some of my favorite records. Back then, I was listening to whatever my mother was listening to, and she is a very avid rock fan. So I would bring some Beatles, some Rolling Stones, The Cream, The Who, Santana, Led Zeppelin. And Fito taught me a little bit of technique, and he started showing me how to play along to these records. And I kept doing that for a few years. And then one day I discovered Rush and the Police. And then immediately I was completely obsessed with Neil Peart and Stuart Copeland for a few years. As a parenthesis, my mother tried to play me an Art Blakey record during that time, and I thought it was one of the most horrible things I ever heard in my life. Because I thought the drum sounded really old and there was no backbeat. So obviously I wasn't ready for that back then. It was very disheartening to realize that I was a pretty mediocre jazz player. But now I realize that the bad thing is not to be mediocre. The bad thing is to be mediocre while you're thinking that you're great. And that's what happened to me for a long time. Every kind of music has a very specific language, which has its own vocabulary, grammar, syntax, pronunciation, accent, just like if you were learning how to speak a different language. So I started studying with a really good teacher, John Ramsey, and we started looking at the ABC of jazz drumming and looking at methods to check out the vocabulary and the grammar. I would be listening to records all the time and transcribing just to kind of check out the pronunciation and the accent. And I realized that whenever I was playing jazz, I had a really thick rock, fusion, Latin accent when I was playing. So I really wanted to get rid of that. And slowly it started happening. But it was a slow process. I also got myself a smaller kit just so that I would sound coherent to the kind of music that I was playing, which is very important. And slowly but surely, you know, I started getting better. But I really wanted to have the same process done for every kind of music that I wanted to learn. And if I was going to learn some Afro-Cuban music or some Brazilian music or jazz, swing, rock, pop, whatever, everything has its own tradition and its own language. So I really didn't want to sound like I had some strange accent when I was playing some kind of music. So that was my main goal, to sound authentic and to sound coherent, to sound like I was fluent on that language. Few things that are very, very important to any kind of music, any style, which is dynamics, interaction, orchestration, and motivic development, or developing ideas as we go along. So dynamics is very important because I think a lot of drummers underestimate the dynamic range that the drums have, or maybe they just don't use the whole thing. We can be loud enough so that we can overwhelm anybody in the band. We can bury them. But we can also be as soft as anybody else. And I really think music should be about contrast. And if you don't have loud, you don't have soft. If you don't have soft, you don't have loud. So it's all about keeping things interesting.